May the Lord open.
Blessed be the eye. Oh, wait a minute. That's not how it goes.
Blessed be the eye.
The fruit.
Blessed be the fruit.
Blessed be the fruit. Whatever.
We're going to talk about Handmaid's Tale, season 2 in particular, roughly, but mainly focusing on that finale that we just had. Glenn, overall, how did you enjoy season 2, and what did you think of the finale?
Season 2, overall, season 2 to me was on par with season 1. It's a lot of tension and pain and heartbreak, and if you like that sort of thing, then this is the show for you. It's not a nice, warm, gentle Family Matters or something. It's hardcore. It's very adult. The finale, I liked it. I have some little things about it that I kind of didn't like, and I would say the show overall tweaks me a little bit in that I don't think it's a little bit outlandish how easily they take over and create Gilead and how people go along with it. But you just kind of go with it because, that's the world they created. So
well, that's the conceit of most dystopian films, right? There's always...
Well, I see it's I think it's 5 years from the flashbacks we see to the present, something like that, maybe less. And it's I don't buy it overall, but you just kind of go with the show, and it's great. It's an amazing show.
Yeah,
the finale was great.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the conceit of most dystopian films. There's always a wild premise. Take the movie series The Purge, right? Where you get one night to commit any kind of crime you want.
Just maybe not quite even as bad as The Handmaid's Tale, as far as I could almost see The Purge happening compared to The Handmaid's Tale, but both very unlikely.
Well, yeah, and so with most dystopian films, that's the conceit you give it. You just say, okay, it's outlandish, that probably would never happen, but if it did,
it's what if.
How do the characters deal with it? And that's the fascinating thing with this show.
Oh yeah.
That I love is, and people. I've heard people ask, well, why do people enjoy dark material or dystopian material or really down and lament material that just takes you to a really dark place, suffering and heinous acts against human beings. It's not so much because you enjoy that, but as I've mentioned in previous reviews, it's the little light of humanity that the characters or certain characters in that story try to bring to the show, and how they try to survive these whatever horrible situation they're in.
It's like any show where people are in a really bad situation that are either good or could have been good. Walking Dead's a good example of started off kind of good and then got terrible, but you're like, why? I want to watch. I want to see what happens. I want to see how they get out of this situation or how it evolves. And that's what this show is done so well, just in every way you can imagine. Every way. I'm not going to go through it, directing, writing, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Yes, perfect in every way, just about.
It's amazing when a show or movie is this spot on. So the creativity is just wild and fascinating, both in the writing.
It's almost an anomaly.
Right.
The show that is this good, and it's like, okay, what's going to happen to make it stupid or mess it up? And 2 seasons in, pretty solid.
Yeah.
Aside from the thing that I mentioned before, and that's minor.
Well, yeah. So I love the show. It's one of my favorite shows of all time, and I think season 2 was as good as season 1, and I enjoyed the finale quite a bit. So should we get into spoilers and talk about the season 2 finale?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Spoilers. So season 2. The story, basically, we have Alfred. I always want to say Alfred,
June.
But June, and she's living back with her
Waterfords.
with the Waterfords, right?
Yeah.
And she's now nursing the baby. That's what the pretense that the husband, Mr. Waterford, brought her back into the home so that they had easy access to help the baby.
Well, and she can pump there and
Right.
would create more milk. Basically, she was drying up at the place they had her, and it was getting worse and worse. And in this new world, I guess there's no formula or anything for babies. Maybe they don't believe in that. So it's like it's got to be breast milk. Maybe.
Yeah. They prefer it because they have the idea that it's better.
Yeah.
Because it's natural, the naturalistic fallacy. So she's there, and I think it was the previous episode where Mrs. Waterford kind of connected with her a little bit. That's an interesting character. She's kind of the meanest one to Alfred or to June.
Serena's a great character,
and also has these little she's a tortured soul too in this story because she's a woman in a man's world
that
she helped create.
Right.
And so she's oppressed and she's feeling it, and her and June connect on that level sometimes. And the previous episode, she had connected and allowed her to, instead of just pump milk, but to actually to feed the child. But so in the finale, we're seeing the other handmaid too. I forget her name.
Emily.
Emily, yeah. And she's living with kind of this quirky engineer type who...
Yeah, that's her new... I don't know, do they ever come up with a term for the master of the house where the handmaids are sent? But anyway, she's in a new house.
A new family.
With a new family. And they're a little bit odd.
Very odd. I have a feeling that he is such a good engineer that... He's been allowed to have some kind
has some
live in
leverage.
private. He keeps his life very private, as he told Emily. But he doesn't want to do the monthly ceremony with her, which is a big thing. And this right when Emily's about to commit suicide, right? Is that she kneels down in front of the fireplace and she pulls a knife out.
I don't know if she was going to commit suicide,
or maybe go after them.
She was going to slit his throat.
Yeah, she's gonna do something, but I mean, she pulled that knife out.
That was my impression.
That's interesting.
She was gonna kill him
because when she kneels down by the fireplace, he's not in the room. It's not time for the ceremony. The ceremony happens later that night, and I was worried that she was maybe going to commit suicide. That's just what went through my head. But it's funny.
Not Emily.
I didn't even think
Emily's kind of a badass. She's the one that stole a car and drove over a guy in season 1, I think.
And then later in this episode, what does she do? Tell us what she does later in this episode.
So, So she has the knife on her, and the guy, I forget the guy's name, but the guy says, "Nah, we're not going to do that. Go back to your room."
He says, "Not with you."
Yeah, I don't remember what he said exactly, and then later on, we see her with Aunt Lydia, who is criticizing her, and I don't remember the exact dialogue, but just kind of the same Aunt Lydia shit, and she just stabs her in the back and pushes her down the stairs and kicks her, and the build up to that and the aftermath of that is just like you're digging your nails into your palm, just thinking, what are they going to do to her next? They've already, castrated her. What do you call it? Mutilated her,
yeah.
For what she did before.
And then put her in that hard labor camp, which I think there was like high levels of radioactive contamination.
Radiation or something, and had her digging that up, and finally, because of the bombing, I guess they brought her back, her and the girl missing the eye.
Right, because a bunch of handmaids had passed.
A bunch of handmaids had been killed, so... But, and she just brutalizes Aunt Lydia. I think Aunt Lydia will be back. She's another great character. I forget the actress's name, but she's just great in everything.
That actress is wonderful to watch, yeah.
Yeah, and Aunt Lydia's a great character, so... We'll see her again. For
I,
sure.
I hope she comes back in season 3, and it would be nice, just like Mrs. Waterford kind of has an arc in her story where she's not just that one-tone hard ass to June all the time, but she has these moments of softness.
She has a lot of guilt that
Right.
builds up, and I think is what it is, because she's a woman and she's treating Offred or June like a slave, basically a sex slave, and now she starts seeing her with the baby, and they've had moments where they've come together, and June has done editing for her when she was writing for her husband who was unconscious. So there's this connection, strong connection with them, that is kind of hostile sometimes. So layered and nuanced and incredible.
Well, yeah. So my point of bringing up a Mrs. Waterford was that she has an arc, and a complicated arc, not just one tone. Where Lydia has been a little one tone, but there's a softness to her sometimes where she has the best interest of the handmaids in mind, but really the children that they produce.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting if, to see where she's going to go next season if she survives the attack. Is she going to become really bitter and become very hostile, or is she going to perhaps be a little softer and realize the plight of these girls? It'll be interesting to see what happens to her character now that she's been attacked. I mean, I'd imagine that she may come back even more ruthless than before. It's hard to predict, but whatever it does, that character is absolutely amazing. I'm so glad this season, especially that they focused a lot on Emily once she finally came back. But even before, we saw her a little bit at the concentration camp or whatever it was that she was at.
Hard
labor camp. But to see somebody else other than June was nice touch. Just to see what else is going on in the world, and what are the handmaids dealing with in their weird families. And
I had a suspicion, I was wrong, but I had a thought that maybe they're grooming her to be more of step into the main character role. I don't know if Elizabeth Moss has signed up for more season. I assume she's signed up for season 3, but if Elizabeth Moss or June had escaped and gotten out of Gilead,
right,
I thought, well, maybe she'll be left behind, but
and then you have Emily.
Took a switch.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. So Emily is there. They're focusing on her more. Elizabeth, June seems like she has a way out. And then at the end of this episode, Emily takes off with the baby because June gives her the baby and she stays. And they set that up perfectly, right? I mean, I thought so, anyways. She has been through both seasons worried about her daughter. We've seen a lot of her daughter. They had the whole thing where they go out to that country house earlier in the season, and she gets to meet with her daughter, and that just had to be heartbreaking to remind her that her daughter's alive and healthy.
It's the first time that she got to actually interact with her in the entire series, other than flashbacks. I think they took her to see her at one point and kept her in the car. But that was a great episode.
Well, right, and they set it up really well in this last episode. So with my favorite scene, so I think the ending is justified by my favorite scene in this. My favorite scene is June is escaping with the baby. The maids, they're not called maids. What do they call them?
The Marthas?
The Marthas. The Marthas sort of set up an Underground Railroad type of thing where they're going to help her escape and take her from house to house. But when she's escaping her own house, the Waterford house, she has to sneak out and wait for the guard to leave, and then she goes past the greenhouse, but then Mrs. Waterford sees her as she's going out, and that scene where Mrs. Waterford and June are there, and Mrs. Waterford wants the baby back, but June gives her the baby.
Terrifying. Yeah.
Not knowing whether she's gonna take off with the baby. I was like on pins and needles on the
Yeah.
edge of my seat the whole time.
Yeah, that was
That was an amazing scene.
very tense. I thought for sure she's just gonna start screaming, grab the baby, and start yelling.
Me too.
Or possibly, I don't know if I
Yeah.
thought for sure, but I was like, oh God, please.
But June's dialogue, written and performed so well, by both actresses. The response and the delivery by June, it was just amazing. She talked her down, and she even was like, "I'm going to give you the baby." Like she agreed to give her the baby to say goodbye, and she basically told her this: "You can't let her live in this world. You can't let her grow up in this world. There's no future for her in this world."
The whole episode and maybe the previous episode has been building up to that whole point where she is telling basically got to a point where she said, she's not going to be able to read the Bible,
right?
And then that set off the whole thing where
Mrs. Waterford
goes to the council and takes a bunch of other wives with her and makes a stand and starts reading from the Bible, and that was a great moment when the women start peeling off. They're like, that's too much, and they start leaving. Some of them,
they realize they crossed the line that they shouldn't have crossed.
Yeah, just tense, and looking at Fred, looking at the commander, just looking at her.
Yeah.
It's like, this is bad. Something really bad's going to happen to you for this.
It was pretty bold of her character to do that and be influenced by June to do it. But that's what's great about her, is that she's not that one-note hard character. We're seeing her struggle in this world. It's not as bad a struggle as June, obviously, because she's not a handmaid who's being raped and sort of living as a slave. But she's a woman in a world where the religious authority and male domination is, she has almost no place in it either, right?
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking for her, because she just, even if she had to live that life, say a comfortable life in a well-to-do family, right? They're not struggling for things, but she wants to have children and she can't. Most people can't. That's why the handmaids are so valuable, right, in this world. And so to watch her with that baby, you can see that she really loves it, and that's just so sad. Like, she would be great as a mother who would adopt a child and probably raise it well in a different world, right? In a dystopian world that this has become. And then, of course, to have June having to stand in the background and watch somebody else fawn over her baby. It's just, it's just a mix of emotions where wow, she really loves that child, but it's not her child. It's crazy. But so my favorite scene again, where June talks her down and convinces her that the baby has to go, can't live here. That sets up the whole end where she shows the baby, her sister, the picture of her sister, tucks it into the baby's blanket, and then gives it to Emily to take off, and then the truck drives away, and we just hold on that close-up of her as... Because she knows that her other daughter, is going to be forced to grow up in this same horrible world, and she cannot have that. And so she's going to risk her life, whatever it takes.
Is it all, for her, is it all about getting that daughter out? Or is she... To me, it was more than that. It was like her willingness or desire to fight back really got amped up, especially in this episode where she just blatantly tells Fred to go fuck himself. And I'm like, wow, this is... All of a sudden, she's just like really in his face.
She's sort of becoming like Emily. Before Emily, Emily's been calmed down a little bit because of all the hell she's been through and the work camp and the mutilation. But she used to be really defiant.
Yeah.
And it seems like June is going to maybe start being really defiant also.
Yeah.
I mean, she was in this last episode, so what are the repercussions for season 3 of her actions?
I'm kind of sad that Emily is out.
Well,
Because I mean,
maybe
obviously,
out.
well, yeah, who knows, right?
Right.
But we'll, even at the very least, we'll see her, in Canada, maybe hooking up with June's husband and friend, and them getting something together, But
So that reminded me. I had a question for you if you had this thought at all. So when June was waiting in the bushes for someone to show up, right? She's told to wait here in the bushes next to the road, and just the water pouring off that bridge in that one spot. I mean, what a wild shot that was. It was just, it made the whole scene seem more dramatic.
very cinematic.
But a vehicle like an SUV comes pulling up and stops on the other side of that waterfall. You're not quite sure who it is, and I had forgotten about Emily and her master that basically took her out of the house. I'd kind of forgotten that because I was all wrapped up in June's story and her escape. That when that car pulled up and she started to walk over to it, just for a moment, I thought that her husband was going to be there. I don't know why, just because he's been trying.
June's husband.
June's husband. I thought that he might, because there was a
Could've
reaction
been.
on her face too of recognition of something, and obviously it was for Emily, but I was just a flash in my mind so I'm wondering if Emily does go to Canada. That's the reason why I brought up that little thought I had that maybe her husband was there. If Emily goes to Canada, she's kind of an inside person now who could really give them the scoop, the inside, really let them know what's going on. Not just what's going on, but specifically in that area. She knows that area a little bit, and the other handmaids there. I just wonder if there's ever going to be a rescue mission from Canada. That's why I kind of thought that maybe we were going to see that. Well, of course, it's hard to do that, to infiltrate and disguise yourself in this very strict society. If you get caught, then you're basically dead. You'll be hanging from the bridge the next day, right?
They'll put you on the wall.
So you'd mentioned that you had a couple of problems with this episode. Maybe. What were they?
Again, sort of minor stuff, but as I was watching it, I started thinking wow, this is all just happening all at once and really quickly, whereas this show is kind of more of a slow burn. June's escape, where it just kind of comes out of nowhere, and I was like, wow, that whole thing could have taken episodes to sort out and set up and build up tension from there. But it was just all of a sudden, I felt like, I guess it's a good thing. It kind of felt like I'm not even sure what's happening because June wasn't involved in it, so June didn't see anything, any of the setup to it.
Right.
But I'm thinking, well, where are they taking her? Are they taking her somewhere? Is this a trap? Is this a trick? Who knows? Who lit all the fires out in the neighborhood? Obviously it's a big distraction for, so that they could get her out of the house. I realize it's a finale, so there's you gotta amp things up, and everything kind of explodes in this episode, which is, I guess, what you want for a finale. But it seemed like all of a sudden everybody was revolting, was pushing back. Miss Waterford with her thing going before the council, and Emily attacking or about to kill the guy whose house she's in, and then attacking
Lydia.
Aunt Lydia, and who knows, maybe killing her. And then the Marthas all get together and help her escape. It's like this, all of a sudden everything came to a head, and I don't know, I just didn't feel the build up to it. It was just kind of felt rushed to me almost.
So I thought about that actually, and
right?
I'll give you my thoughts
and
on
it. It's not a big criticism, but it did ding me a little when I was watching it.
Let me throw this at you, see if it changes your mind or if you still feel that same way. So I thought about that. I thought, wow, this life was going on. June's there helping with the baby. Mrs. Waterford had her thing with the council, her pinky taken off, and life is miserable, and nothing really big seems like it's going to happen.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
But then Emily does what she does to Aunt Lydia, and I'm wondering if her master set it all in motion. Because with Aunt Lydia getting hurt like that, he knows, okay, she's going to die.
Yeah, she's dead.
So he has to do something, and I think he might have been the engineer of the whole thing.
Yeah, maybe. That's a lot to pull off, though. Getting all those Marthas, and the main Martha of the Waterford house obviously was in on it, and maybe had been a big part of setting it up. I love her attitude too. Her attitude changed from like the beginning of the show, how she's become so much more of a friend to June, and much more like of an ally. Whereas before she was kind of cold and standoffish.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously this kind of all got set off by Eden and her boyfriend being executed, right?
Well,
That's
right.
sort of like the impetus for it, and if you watch that episode where they push him into the pool and everyone's there watching, Serena's there, June's there, all the handmaids are there, and Serena's watching that, and just that's sort of like a snapping moment for Serena, and I'm not sure why, because so much horrible stuff happens on this show. Why was that one thing? Okay, it's a young girl. She was innocent, and they just murdered her and the guy. And it's like, okay, that was terrible.
Well, keep in mind, Serena doesn't have any real friends. She hangs out with some of the wives, but they're all kind of competing for status and
True.
and whatnot. So you have a young girl who seems very devout and religious, like yourself, who moves into your house, who marries your trusted driver and guard and all-around helper. And so she has this day in and day out, connection with this girl, which would have been interesting if they had built that up a little bit more to show that breaking moment when she gets thrown in the pool, right? Like if she had if Mrs. Waterford had a bigger connection with that young teenager, that teenage girl, was she like 15 or 16 or something?
Yeah.
If she had a little bit more connection with her, I think that breaking moment when watching her get drowned would have been even more powerful. But that said, I think like June sort of sold it to her. If a girl who's this devout, who's this religious, who wants to understand what's expected of her by her deity,
She's trying to understand the Bible.
yeah. And what's expected of her is somebody this innocent, this young, a child, who wants to do right by the world and by God, is put to death in this society.
She's a perfect model for the society that she's in,
Yeah.
and has done everything right except
this one thing.
Where she ran off with this guy.
Which June also put that little seed in her mind in a previous episode when she said, she said something to her like, if you find love, you grab onto it and don't let go, or something like that. And then cut to she and that one bodyguard are missing, right? Because that poor teenager, not understanding why her husband doesn't love her and show her
Well,
affection.
she knew though. She knew that he and June had a thing together.
Well, right.
Maybe not like she didn't have hard evidence, but I think she knew.
She started to suspect,
and
but
she could have ruined that for June and Nick. And the fact that June and Nick are the father of the baby, not Mr. Waterford
right.
and June.
Well, I don't think she knew that, but
well, yeah, but that's just like a big,
But somebody so young and so naive only understands that she's supposed to go out into the world and marry somebody and love them and help take care of the house and raise children and all this stuff. She gets put in that position and she's working really hard to do it and gets nothing in return from her husband. completely tortured by that, right?
Yeah,
and that's why she runs off.
He was a sad character.
Yeah.
Another great character.
A great character. So yeah, it did take me by surprise when the Underground Martha Railroad sort of started to get her out. But I thought of the two things. One I just mentioned was I think the engineer set everything in motion because he had to get Emily out. He's like, well, Emily, I'm going to turn her in and she's going to be put to death.
Why would he do that?
I think there's a lot going on with this guy.
I like that character. I'm so happy they introduced a male character who's not a total piece of shit. Like most, I mean, Nick and now this guy.
Well, and her husband, of
June's
course.
husband, but he's not. He's really in his own little.
People
story.
who are wrapped up in this dystopian, situation. But yeah, so.
Yeah, I like that character. I want to see more of him and what he's about. And
yeah,
I think you're right. Maybe he set the whole thing.
And that's speculation.
Who knows?
Like he just shows up there at the end, but he seems like is part of the plan. So I'm wondering if he did, and they may or may not explain it in season 3. But if you think back, and this is something that they could have chosen to focus on a little bit more in season 2, that they mentioned a few times in season 1. With when we first, are introduced to the handmaids and we're seeing everything through June's eyes and she's learning what it's like to be a handmaid. I think it was Emily and maybe some of the other handmaids tell her that there are people out there who are trying to change things. That there's a rebellion basically. There's an underground. There are people who are trying to make a difference.
Yeah, was that Emily? I don't remember.
Well, it was. Yeah, I think it was because she walked with her. And you got told that, I think. I can't remember, but whoever it was, there was mention of it a few times. And it's nice to see that the other people in the world, the Marthas, because the Marthas aren't treated well either. So it's easy to see how
they're not raped ceremonially.
But it's easy to see how they could be. They're basically
servants.
They're servants. They're slaves. It's easy to see that they could be convinced to help people. These handmaids who are basically in horrible situation, and then especially after seeing the teenager get drowned, that oh my goodness, there's these young baby girls now being born into the society, and we need to help them get out because our lives are ruined. We're stuck in it. Well, at least we can risk our lives for these babies and get them out so that they don't have to grow up, in this world. Oh, and that just reminded me. Mr. Waterford has one of the creepiest scenes of all 2 seasons in just a few lines of dialogue when he walks up behind.
Something can be worked out, maybe. You stay in the house.
And then he says,
"Fuck yourself, Fred."
He says, "We could try for a boy this time."
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that was creepy.
Yep.
He's like his hands on her back, and he's.
He reminds me of the guy from, now I'm not going to be able to come up with the movie. What's the Spanish language Guillermo del Toro movie with the little girl and the Pan's Labyrinth?
Pan's Labyrinth, yeah.
That movie, he reminds me a little bit of that guy, that commander. That guy was a stone cold savage, but he's like in that same vein of, total fascist.
It's interesting, though, too, because he, in certain scenes, especially with Kate Moss's character, June, he has shown some kindness, especially in season 1, but I think it's only to manipulate her to get what he wants, Yeah,
it's a total manipulation.
It's manipulation, but you can see by what he's done to his own wife that he's drinking the Kool-Aid.
I thought she was gone, to be honest. Not gone, but I thought they were going to put her in some prison camp too, because that was so blatant. Starting to read the Bible in front of the council, they cut her little pinky off, but it's bad. But I thought, whoa, she's either dead or they're gonna just do some really horrible thing to her. But she's the wife of a commander, and he must have stepped in and done something, leveraged something. But
yeah,
one moment I love in the show, it has these little moments where a little bit of almost humor comes through, and sometimes it's just kind of gallows humor, but all the handmaids are walking along the riverbed and talking about Eden's death and the horrible things that are going on, and Janine, remember her name, who is the girl who's missing the eye, goes, you know, you should just not talk about that stuff. I mean, I don't complain, and she points at her eye or something like that. I was like, oh, Janine, she's so gone.
That poor girl.
It was kind of funny. It was like, I don't complain, and kind of motions to the eye.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where it's funny, but it's funny because of it's so horrible.
Yeah. It's so terrible and sad, and yet at the same time, kind of funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, overall great. Maybe even A+ for this season. Same with the first season. Probably an A+. Again, I can't think of what. There's tiny little things that I might have changed, but I don't think that they're necessarily bad things. There's just kind of things that ding me, especially with this episode. But it's a great show. It's worth watching.
This show is one of the few shows that, for me, is an A+, and both seasons, and almost every episode.
Can they maintain that?
Can they maintain it? They have been so far.
It's just like everything came together. The writing, the directing,
the acting,
the set design, the acting.
Watching close-ups,
the cinematography, the shots that they get are just incredible. The overhead shots.
The lighting.
Thank God for drones.
Watching close-ups of Elizabeth Moss. Yeah. And her expression. There was a scene, I think, in this episode, or maybe it was a previous episode, where she's standing there and somebody is behind her saying stuff that she just cannot stand, cannot bear. And the camera's on her face, and she's just showing you every...
That was this episode, where Waterford was talking to her.
It was the scene with Waterford. But just she can emote so much with so little
the final scene
movement.
Where she's about to get into the van and escape, and then hands the baby and just stands there and does we do one of those shots where she looks up into camera, and it's like, oh, it's on. She's into it now.
Yeah. And then she puts her hood on.
Yeah, it's like, now what? Now where do we go?
Yeah.
I'm there.
I'm there. I can't wait for season 3. I would love to see this show get 3, 4, 5 seasons if they can maintain it.
I heard they're thinking about doing 10 seasons, which I don't know how they can.
I don't know. I'm there for the ride.
It's one of those shows where you either love it or you kind of hate it. I know there's people that don't like it because it's so grim and dark
and a little slow for some people.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it's perfectly paced.
If you're into Marvel movies and action and stuff, probably you wouldn't like it. But if you have a brain cell in your head, it's pretty great. Blessed be the fruit. You should just not talk about that stuff. I mean, I don't complain.